Welcome to the complete beginner's guide to Fraymakers. Because early access just dropped, I'm making this guide to help people improve and get good. Because while it's very fun, Fraymakers can be quite difficult. But yeah, Fraymakers is a very fast-paced and aggressive platform fighter that feels simultaneously similar to other titles in the genre, while also bringing in some new mechanics such as the assist meter. So that's why this video exists as a sort of beginner guide to people who are either new to platform fighters in general, or just new to Fraymakers. So with all of my experience playing in the tester program, I want to help give you guys an idea of how to get better at the game as quickly as possible. And if you're a complete newbie, Fraymakers will feel pretty similar to other platform fighters such as Rivals of Aether and Smash Bros, as the game plan and structure is very similar, which means a lot of those fundamentals from other games will carry over. I'm going to be splitting this guide into 4 sections. This section, which is the introduction to Fraymakers, the second section, which will talk about the unique mechanics of Fraymakers, the third section, which will talk about arguably the most important aspect of the entire game, being movement, and the last section will cover all things improvement and how to actually get good. So before we talk about the actual mechanics of the game, you may be wondering, what character should you play? On release, there's only 4 playable characters right now, with 2 more additional fighters on the way. So here's my breakdown of the cast. First up is Commander Video, who I would recommend to players who like that rushdown and heavy combo playstyle of characters such as Fox in Smash Bros. He's the movement god of this game, and has a very high skill ceiling for players who like to be more technical. That being said, he's not too overly complex starting out, so it makes him sort of a perfect, easy to pick up, but hard to master character. Next is Weltaro, who I call the quote-unquote Mario of this game, not just because he has a fair spike, but he's also sort of that up-close and personal brawler type of gameplay. He does have an ammo mechanic as well as multiple jumps, which can be a little tricky to learn when you're a new player. So learning how to balance your ammo and jumps well so you don't end up killing yourself off stage can take some time. That being said, definitely worth trying, so do not be discouraged by the ammo. It definitely comes more natural the more you play him. Octodad is another popular character I see for a lot of new players, and it's clear to see why. He's one of the most fun characters starting out. I will say I recommend Octodad for more precise and patient play. He's not really a hold-forward character where you can just run in like you can with Commander Video, so if you like kind of outspacing your opponent in neutral and getting big punishes off of that, Octodad is going to be your character. And the last character is Orcane, who is the closest we have to a traditional zoner, but also not really that much of a zoner. If you're a fan of Rivals of Aether Orcane, he can be aggressive in the same way with big combos off of hits, while kind of struggling to get those neutral wins sometimes. And I would say that all 4 of the characters are fairly competitively viable, especially this early on in the meta. So while it doesn't really matter who you pick at first, I do recommend sticking with whoever you pick, as it's much easier to improve when you're only playing one character. Anyways, once you've picked your character, you need to learn how to play the actual game. So let's talk about the mechanics. There are 3 main unique mechanics in Fraymakers that help make it stand out from other platform fighters: air dashes, assists, and shields. Every character in Fraymakers can perform an air dash by pressing shield in the air, similar to an air dodge. Unlike air dodges though, you don't get invulnerability during this move, and it will put your character into special fall after. However, this move does come with a fun property, being that you can cancel it into any of your aerials. This works great for like extending combos that are normally outside of your reach, or just working as a fast burst option in neutral to approach, almost acting sort of as like a third jump in some ways. That being said, you can't cancel this into any special moves, only aerials. And as long as you hit your aerial, you won't go into special fall or take massive landing lag, letting you actually continue the combos. However, if you do miss the aerial, you do go into special fall and you do have massive landing lag. In fact, the landing lag from missing an aerial is actually more from not doing an aerial at all. So if you know for 100% sure that you wouldn't be able to hit your opponent with an air dash aerial, just doing an air dash will give you less landing lag. This mechanic may seem daunting at first for new players, but with practice it becomes the most useful and probably important mechanic in the entire game. The next mechanic is assists. In Fraymakers, players will choose their assist on the assist select screen, and after dealing damage to your opponent, you can charge the assist meter, letting you summon your assist to aid you. Each one costs a different amount of damage to summon, and you can check that information on the select screen. As for actually summoning the assist, you need to bind a button in the controls for this, specifically for this action. Which is why I've noticed a lot of new players aren't used to using assists, simply because they forget they even have that button at all. So just using your assist at all will give you a huge advantage starting out. And although I'd love to talk about the intricacies of every specific one, that would take so long, so instead I have an entire assist guide out there that covers the entire topic, so if you're interested in learning about those, you can definitely check out that video after this. Anyways, that's how assists work. And the last mechanic I want to talk about is shields. Shields in Fraymakers are unique in the fact that they only protect the front half of the user. This makes you obviously very vulnerable from behind. However, there are some buffs to compensate for this. Shields don't decrease in size over time and actually cannot be broken, letting you freely hold shields for as long as you please. As you can imagine, this makes projectiles much less effective in Fraymakers due to the nature of not feeling pressured to approach due to a weakening shield. Shields in Fraymakers also come with a unique mechanic known as parries. To do a parry, you simply press special while in shield. And currently, you get a 3-frame window where if you're attacked during that window, it'll freeze the opponent and give you frame advantage, letting you get a punish. That being said, this mechanic's not really a huge deal until the top level of play, so I wouldn't stress too much about parries. Just know if you think you're going to be hit from behind your shield, going for a parry is not a bad idea to cover your back. Oh, and one last thing, parries can also reflect projectiles, so it could also be worth learning for that. Alright, let's talk movement, the most fun part of the entire game. It's what makes platform fighters what they are after all, and Fraymakers has plenty of useful movement mechanics. Of course, you have dash dances, which are fantastic. Characters in this game tend to have very big initial dashes, letting you vary the distance and sizes of your dash dances, letting you have complete control on your movement. This is very important on faster characters like CV, who really excel at using movement to their advantage. So you're going to want to practice using dash dancing in your gameplay as a sort of bait and punish strategy, where you want to whiff punish your opponents who go for a committal option, by dash dancing out of their attack range and then punishing them when they're doing their lag. Along with dash dancing is another important mechanic called dash cancelling, one of the staples of competitive Smash Flash. Essentially, you can crouch during a run and then immediately input the opposite direction to start a dash that way, letting you completely bypass the whole turnaround animation. Combining this with dash dancing lets you truly outmaneuver your opponents and get a massive advantage in neutral. And of course, we can't talk movement without the Wavedash. To perform one is pretty easy. All you need to do is perform an air dash into the ground. If you do this during your jump squat, you can do a wave dash without ever leaving the ground at all. And much like you can do in Rivals, by holding left or right, you can get a max distance wave dash without ever leaving the ground. And in Fraymakers, you can even bind a wave dash button in the settings, which makes doing a max distance wave dash pretty consistent and easy for new players. Now the best way to utilize wave dashing is a mechanic called wave landing. Wave landing is very important in Fraymakers, and in my opinion, one of the key parts to learning how to master the movement in this game, especially on stages with platforms. Essentially, all you want to do is perform a wave dash while landing onto a stage or a platform. The most immediate and important use for this is allowing you to quickly land onto a platform and do a grounded option. In fact, wave landing is so crucial, I highly recommend you practice it with your character. One of the best ways to practice this is pick Merchant Port, which has different platforms at different heights, allowing you to do different types of wavelands and just kind of master your movement. So once you have wavelands and wave dashes mastered, you can also start implementing ledge dashes. Ledge dashes in Fraymakers are pretty easy to do. You can simply input an air dash during the jump off of a ledge to immediately get a ledge dash. I really recommend learning how to do this. Doing a ledge dash downward into anything is much faster than just doing a normal getup. So if you want to do fast options off of ledge, you have to learn how to do ledge dashes. So now if you've been practicing your movement and you understand the mechanics of this game, how do you actually get good? There's honestly a lot of things you can do to improve, from reviewing your own replays to getting coaching from other players, but for most players when you're starting out, the best advice really is just put in a lot of hours. The more you play the game, the more experience you'll get with the game feel, the more matchup experience you'll gain, the more understanding you'll have of assists and stages, and over time your general knowledge will increase. Of course, putting in hours is not just enough, you also need a healthy growth mindset, which means when you lose, take it as an opportunity to actually get better. See what you did wrong, improve, don't just blame the game and the characters and just all sorts of other things. I mean, really, when you discredit your opponents to winning by just, oh, their character is better, you're really doing a disservice to yourself. And it's also pretty disrespectful to your opponents. In general, when you play people in fighting games, try and show some respect to your opponents and don't have too much of an ego. And of course, my last piece of advice for improving is remember to actually have fun. The game is a video game, like seriously. A lot of people forget that when they're trying to become good. Becoming good is important, but if you're not having fun while doing it, then maybe reassess your goals and try and align them in a way where you can have fun while getting better. Anyways, that's it for the beginner's guide. And before I do leave, I want to drop the link to the competitive Fray Discord if you're interested in joining competitive Fraymakers. Whether you want to enter tournaments or just get better at the game, there's plenty of things here for you. So yeah, go ahead and join that if you're interested, and thanks for watching.